Helldivers 2 is finally here, and it's everything I hoped it would be. The game has huge potential if it can sort out huge launch day issues and deliver on consistent new content that expands the universe and continues to bring new players into the fold. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today I'm sharing my thoughts on this new third-person co-op tactical shooter. Depending on when you watch this video, Helldivers 2 could still be dealing with some crippling launch issues, primarily network connectivity problems and hardware-related issues that once again scream of an unoptimized game. Obviously, your mileage may vary based on your system's hardware, but by and large, a huge swath of the community is having some sort of issue. That being said, I always assume developers are going to push past these issues, and while I hate that they're all too common, I want to look at the essence of the game itself, because that's truly what you want to learn more about. Helldivers 2 took the brilliant concept from the original game and changed the perspective. That alone makes this a completely new game. The bones are pretty much the same, and a majority of the systems carried over, but it's that viewpoint shift that truly makes all the difference in the world. Even a year after an official Starship Trooper game was released, Helldivers 2 feels like a more authentic experience than the arcadey and campy nature of that game. Helldivers 2 by my standards could eventually become one of the best co-op games out because it's perfectly designed for a night of mayhem with your friends. There's not a ton to distract you from the main draw of the game, the missions and the global war to defend Super Earth. If you're unfamiliar with the gameplay loop, let me break that down. You play as a Helldiver, and your job is to drop down onto various planets and liberate them from various enemy threats. Each mission has a primary objective, but along the way, there are secondary objectives that further add to the resources that you can gain if you successfully extract. Missions get increasingly more challenging based on the difficulty you select, but as always, with more risk comes more reward. The action is all built around third-person co-op gunplay, and the game is at its absolute best when rocking with a full squad of 4. That's the loop, but let's take a step back and really peel back the underlying systems powering the game. Your home away from home is a custom ship, which you can name something ridiculous, and inside are just a few systems that allow you to adjust your mission loadout. Stratagems, which are powerful mid-mission call-ins, can be customized to fit your playstyle and team composition. This includes things like specialty weapons, orbital strikes, and iconic emplacements like the Gatling gun from the first game. The list has expanded quite a bit, and there are some awesome options I just can't wait to explore, but you will have to grind out some levels and currency before you can tap into all the offerings. There's also the Requisition Shop. Here you'll spend medals earned in and after missions on various pieces of armor and an array of weapons. It's a progression system masquerading as a battle pass and will feel familiar to anyone that's played any sort of live service game in the last few years. As you spend medals and reach certain thresholds, you'll unlock new pages of potential gear, but that means there's a lot of options locked behind those thresholds. Personally, I'd rather see a more flexible system that's either tied to mission progression and objectives, or an open system that's more accessible from the very start. There's also a premium currency shop that gives players the chance to spend real money for cosmetics, and while it is its own thing, it doesn't present the best optics next to the progression shop. That being said, let's look at it for what it is: a cosmetic shop. You'll be able to unlock premium currency by spending medals as part of your regular progression, and you'll even find small bundles of premium currency during missions, so it certainly doesn't require you to spend real money, but the option is there. As far as I can tell, this doesn't detract from the action itself, mainly because you get medals just by playing the game, completing daily quests, and finding them during missions. Same goes for premium currency. You spend medals to get the premium currency, and you can also find that during a mission. They're not exactly hard to come by, it's just a system I don't necessarily prefer. Outside of those two systems, stratagems and requisitions, it's all about the global war, and this looks and feels very familiar to how it did in the first game. Whoever is leading the squad gets to choose which front of the war to battle on. For the most part, there is an active front, which is where all the player activity is, so if you're looking to play with other people and you don't have a group, you want to be on the active front. You could also choose to play solo and go wherever you want, but the game is certainly better with a group or when you're engaging with the active front. Then you choose a sector, and within that sector, a planet you want to focus your liberation efforts on. From there, you can scroll around the world finding new mission zones or jumping into missions that other players are actively engaged in. This is one of my favorite features of Helldivers 2, the ability to just drop into another mission and go. It's seamless when the servers are working, and will ensure that multiplayer action is always accessible. With your mission selected and your loadout locked in, it's time to drop into the action, and this is where the magic happens. Helldivers 2 is a slow and controlled burn. You can take it as fast or as slow as you'd like, and that really depends on your group. It can feel incredibly slow at times, but that's only if you explore the remote parts of a map and complete the various optional objectives. On the flip side, you could just beeline it for the main objective, and depending on the mission, that will certainly increase the tempo of the fighting. Ultimately, the game's intensity is driven by a few things: the difficulty of the mission objectives itself, and how many squad mates you have. All three things factor into the overall chaos of the action. Truthfully, that's what I love about Helldivers 2, and that's not an altogether new experience. It just feels new because of the perspective change. You're still calling in resources, exploring alien worlds, and blowing up enemies. Literally nothing has changed there, but because of the third-person perspective, everything feels like it's leveled up. The first thing you'll most likely notice, apart from the worlds themselves, which look much better than I anticipated, is the traversal. Your Helldiver moves slowly, and somehow that weightiness seems to have transferred over from the original top-down perspective. You move slower than I'd say the average speed of an Avatar in most games, and while you do have a generous sprint window, its lack of speed is part of the difficulty factor because it forces you to prioritize positioning. There's also no jump mechanic, but you can vault over and onto different items and ultimately reach some higher elevations. This is a pretty solid way to cheese the action, especially early on, but once jumping and ranged enemies spawn in, things tend to level out. What I find most notable about the game at launch is the gunplay and combat systems. No longer is Helldivers bound by twin-stick shooting, and that means we're talking about completely new dimensions of fighting. Not only that, but your field of view is that of a traditional third-person game, which means you have about a 90-degree cone of view, and any enemies outside of that are in your blind spots. That can be terrifying when enemies are twice your size and you can only absorb a few hits before dying. Again, it's a completely new dynamic that you have to experience firsthand. I also have to point out that the game's gunplay is very unique, and you're either going to love it or hate it. The game features both third and first-person gunplay, which is pretty impressive given that the team had to create both from the ground up. I don't know if there's a technical term for the style of gunplay, but it reminds me of a fighter pilot game where you have your cursor, which is your desired aim point, and then the actual targeting reticle, which is your actual aim point. It's floaty and smooth, and there's certainly a learning curve to mastering it, but it works really well for this game. Again, I think this is going to be make or break for some folks, but for me, it clicks, and I'm enjoying experimenting and pushing that system to the brink. When Helldivers 2 is at its absolute best is during chaotic moments where you're relying on your allies and using call-ins to survive. The offerings, as I mentioned before, are expansive, and seeing something like an orbital bombardment take out a pack of bugs never gets old. There is one glaring omission from the current selection, and that's mechs, which were such a huge part of the original Helldivers, but the team has already said they're coming soon after launch. Luckily, things like turrets and launchers are already in the game, so if you're longing for a bit of nostalgia, they've got you covered. Ultimately, where Helldivers 2 is going to sink or swim is with their post-launch content. The game has the foundation of a live service title, but that's really going to depend on how fast and how engaging additional content is. With the game already selling well on both PC and PlayStation, I think there's a ton of potential here. The team just needs to clean up the issues and keep their foot on the gas. What's going to be critical to the success of the game is not just the introduction of new weapons and stratagems, but entirely new systems and ways to engage with the world. The global war system is a perfect way to keep the community aspect of Helldivers 2 alive, but how can they continue to expand that to make it even more engaging? It's never been more challenging to grab and hold the attention of players, and Helldivers 2 has that opportunity thanks to its unique premise. It just can't let the opportunity slip away. So there you have it, my thoughts on Helldivers 2 for now. The game just released, and I'll be spending a few dozen hours chipping away to really get a sense for the game's strengths and weaknesses, but I'm curious, what do you guys think so far? Leave me a comment down below and share your thoughts about the game. Of course, if you want to keep up with the latest games, reviews, guides, and more, you already know what to do. Consider dropping a like on the video, and of course subscribing so you never miss a thing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.